Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening if you're in a different time zone. Welcome to our webinar titled Navigating the Waters, Exploring the Potential of Carbon Finance in the WASH Sector. I'm Charlie Iceland, Director of Water Initiatives here at the World Resources Institute, and it's my pleasure to host this insightful session today. Today's webinar is a collaborative effort that brings together the Millennium Water Alliance and its members, including our team here at WRI. Our collective goal is to delve into the role of carbon finance in advancing sustainable water, sanitation, and hygiene initiatives, particularly focusing on how this can impact vulnerable communities. Our objectives for this webinar are twofold. First, we aim to share valuable insights from a study that assesses the feasibility of using carbon finance as a sustainable solution for WASH projects. And second, we seek your active engagement, feedback, and questions. Your engagement will help shape the study report to be published in January, as well as future strategies on WASH and carbon finance. Before we proceed, I want to acknowledge the support of the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation. Their contributions have been instrumental in bringing the study to life. Also, a special thanks to everyone involved in the research and in the organization of this event. Your efforts have made today's session possible. As we navigate through today's session, we'll have Jason Lopez, Deputy Director of the Millennium Water Alliance, sharing key findings and implications of the study. So let's get started and dive into the topic of carbon finance in the WASH sector. Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you very much, Charlie. We'll go ahead and get started here. As Charlie mentioned, we are presenting Navigating the Waters, Exploring the Potential of Carbon Finance in the WASH Sector. So we'll do it. We already do our introduction of the study and what we hope to gain today. We'll also go over a learning study that we've done, as well as some key findings from a feasibility study that we're conducting, and then of course questions and feedback, and we hope for much audience participation from you all, and some rich discussion and help inform the final study. Introduction. So we began by assessing the feasibility of leveraging carbon credits and WASH. Our focus here is on sustainability, ensuring that operations and maintenance can continue in the long run, especially for the most vulnerable communities. Next, we evaluated the potential of carbon finance. Can carbon credits be more than a financial tool? We're looking at their role in fostering long-term sustainability, specifically targeting scalable solutions that benefit the poorest and most vulnerable. And why Ethiopia? Well, it presents its unique challenges and opportunities in WASH. By studying this context, we aim to understand specific dynamics that can inform wider strategies, hopefully making our findings globally relevant and applicable. So today is about sharing. We're bringing you the findings of our study to you, our audience. This is a unique platform for knowledge exchange. We're here to connect the dots between WASH and carbon finance. We hope to have a rich dialogue amongst the experts in the field like yourselves. Your feedback is crucial. It's not just about presenting what we found, it's also about listening to you all. Your insights, questions, critiques, especially critiques, are vital for refining the study, and we really want to embrace a multitude of perspectives, ensuring our approaches and conclusions are well-rounded and inclusive. Basically, don't be shy. The end goal is to shape the future. The insights we gather and share today are stepping towards guiding policy and practical applications in WASH and carbon finance. So today you'll get a preview of the study findings. Our full report will be published in January, and we'll delve deeper in this session with you crucial insights and immediate relevance to both WASH and the carbon sector. So it's a glimpse of what we've discovered and why it matters, and we hope to really make it as relevant to you all as we can. Think of today as setting the stage for the full report. We are highlighting areas that we think require deeper exploration and to discuss discuss the methodologies of the study, and build upon the full study. Uh, Finally, we hope to aim to provide you a few actionable insights and see how these insights can be applied to your work, and to see what you can look out for in the full report. Oh. So the learning study. So the idea of the learning study was to determine the viability and scale of carbon credits in the wash sector, based on a Conrad N Hilton funded projects in Ethiopia. So not just the SWP project, but also a project that's being implemented by Windrock. So carbon credits work by monetizing positive environmental impacts of projects. This income can be used to cover project costs, supporting the financial viability of WASH initiatives. So the idea is collect carbon credits, use that to pay for either everything from capital expenditure to operations and maintenance, depending on how much revenue you're able to generate. So I don't want to spend too much time on what carbon credits are. There are a lot of resources out there to find more about this. But basically, a carbon credit stands for 1 ton of carbon dioxide emissions reduced, removed, or avoided. They're usually issued by a carbon standard against a set of rules, procedures, and they call it a methodology. These credits can then be sold to generate revenue for carbon credit generating activities. So carbon credits are a tool for organizations to finance activities that reduce emissions. Credits are bought and sold on the market to generate revenue for sustainable projects. Many companies have net zero emissions goals and use carbon credits to offset emissions they cannot eliminate through direct action. Note the idea here, the primary goal is that companies reduce their own carbon emissions as much as possible, and then purchase carbon credits for unavoidable emissions. The accreditation process. The study will have this in more detail. It's a very complex process, but the initial step in the accreditation process is usually getting a feasibility study. It's usually a short one. We did a full study for this project. There's also validation and registration to ensure adherence with selected standards. Necessary for consistent monitoring, post-validation to ensure data collection aligns with project design. And after the monitoring phase, the project undergoes verification, leading to the issuance of carbon credits. Generally, this process takes about 2 to 3 years before you start seeing any credits issued. Finally, there's ongoing validation. Carbon credits are not one-time efforts. They require revalidation every 5 years to maintain their standing, and oftentimes they can continue for a period of up to 10 to 15 years. Key stakeholders. Now, this is there's a lot of moving parts here, and this can change a lot. So most projects have the water users, so the people who generate the credits, and then you have a project owner, who is the person who is responsible for said project. Oftentimes they're one in the same person, or they can be. But the project owner ends up being the designated legal entity who represents and manages the project. You also have project developers. So a project developer, so the project owner can also be a project developer, but oftentimes they're another party that helps drive the performance of the project, often provides financing for conducting carbon credit projects. Or they also or provide technical and financial tools and support. There's also several third parties. So you have consultants who you can bring in for specialized credit schemes. You have third-party retailers who help sell or trade the credits, who are linked to carbon credit markets. You also have standard organizations such as the Gold Standard and Vera, which set the criteria and benchmarks for carbon credit projects. And you also have third-party auditors who perform independent verifications to ensure that they're meeting the requirements of the methodologies. Okay, so WASH and carbon credits. So there's Mainly three types of projects you can do specific to water. This is shift from non-renewable energy to renewable energy, reducing direct emissions from sanitation, and replacing boiling of drinking water with alternative green methods to provide safe drinking water. So for shifting from non-renewable energy, this is responsible for about 1% of total greenhouse gas emissions. Again, this is a global issue. It's not just specific to what we do in water. Um, we also have greenhouse gas emissions from sanitation, particularly non-sewerage systems that emit methane, account for about 1% of global emissions. And reducing the impact of boiling drinking water using solid fuels. So broadly, solid fuels contributed to about 2% of global emissions, with a fraction of that being from boiling drinking water. So while cooking with solid fuels is a major emitter, the subset of boiling water is also significant. In addition to directly water-related wash sector carbon credit projects, you also have a reforestation and watershed and wetland efforts for water resource management. You also have clean cooking solutions such as biodigesters, which can be fed through manure, sewerage, and agricultural waste. The point is there are different avenues for carbon credits in WASH. Okay. So carbon projects in Ethiopia. There are currently no projects that we were able to find that are focused on the shift from non-renewable energy to renewable energy for WASH infrastructure. There are also currently no projects for direct emissions from sanitation, reducing direct emissions from sanitation. And there were 25 projects registered for replacing the boiling of drinking water with alternative measures. So let's go more into the shift from non-renewable energy. So the shift is, again, let's say you replace a diesel-powered pump with a solar-powered pump in a multi-village water scheme. This would save you about 800 liters of diesel a day at about 373 liters, equaling 1 ton of carbon. That's 2.14 per day. All right. So the issue with getting credits for solar power is scale. So current interventions do not lack the scale to be really able to get carbon credits from replacing solar panels for carbon credits. So there's discrepancies between the cost of diesel and what you can get for a carbon credit currently on the market. So if you one calculation here. So to get financial viability, we calculated about 50,000 liters of diesel a day would need to be replaced with solar panels, and that's the equivalent to 86 football fields of solar panels to get to a break-even point. We hope to have more detailed, more precise measurements by the time we published. So yeah, it becomes an issue of scale. So the recommendation is, in theory, you can get carbon credits for renewable energy projects for WASH, but the scale needs to be very large. You need to be doing a lot of projects and cover a lot of ground in order to justify the costs associated with implementing a carbon credit project. Considering that, it is important to find other ways to finance and fund switching from diesel to solar power. About reducing emissions from sanitation. So direct emissions from sanitation are a significant source of methane and contribute to greenhouse gases. We couldn't track down any activities that do this in Ethiopia, but globally there are methane capture projects that capture wastewater treatment, capture methane from a wastewater treatment plant. However, this wouldn't necessarily be viable in Ethiopia. So there are significant methane emissions in Ethiopia associated with on-site sanitation. So your household and community latrines. This is an estimated 7.5 million tons of carbon a year in emissions. there's an absence of there's no methodology to measure or certify these emissions. I know it's something that's being studied right now, but there is a gap there for being able to get carbon credits from capturing these on-site emissions. Recommendation is we should all invest in a methodology for this. This is actually has a lot of potential to it, and if we're able to work on it and actually quantify and monitor and track how we reduce emissions from on-site sanitation, it would be very effective. And the way things are looking now, when the next round of the whatever follows the SDGs, it will likely also have a carbon component to it as well throughout whatever interventions we do. Mm-hmm. And now let's go to the meat of this: boiling drinking water. So in Ethiopia, there are about 800 chlorine dispensers being used at water points to generate credits. There are 3 projects that support household filters, so the household distribution and maintenance of filters. They also get carbon credits, and then there's also construction of 4 pipe water schemes that are providing water to public standpoints with chlorination that also are getting credits. Those are projects with water treatment. And there's also projects without water treatment. So there are 22 of those. Those work to improve the water quality or rehabilitate an existing water point and ensure water quality that way. So these are projects without treatment. But the key point is ensuring water quality. So let's start out with the projects without water treatment. So there's a distinction between the ones that have water treatment and do not. We all know that water treatment doesn't just end at the water quality at the standpipe. The gold standard, which is the one that most people use for safe water, it is becoming more stringent. So the new methodology requires it be E. coli free for 90% of the samples that you monitor. So that's a very high bar to achieve. And to achieve that without any sort of treatment is extremely difficult. One thing I wanted to add to, there is a lot of the things that are going on with carbon credits nowadays. If you are doing credits that are you can't justify or can't prove that you're actually meeting the contributions or carbon reductions that you're stating, they will and are being heavily scrutinized publicly. So this is very key for any carbon credit project. So replacing boiling with water treatment. So it is so the challenges derive from low rates of boiling, which is often the baseline for emissions and carbon credit projects. There's also a concept of suppressed demand, where it's assumed that users would boil water if they had the means. So yeah, it just, again, what I was saying earlier, it just had to be careful. If you're applying suppressed demand, know that this has to clearly apply. Mm-hmm. And here's another issue with the boiling of water. In Ethiopia, to justify the suppressed demand in Ethiopia, in general, there's a very low presence of boiling water, regardless of the wealth quintile. However, in Uganda, where you have in the higher quintiles, there is a large presence of boiling water, so it's much easier to make the justification for suppressed demand. Mm-hmm. So yeah, again, if you're doing suppressed demand, make sure you have strong evidence, and then in areas where it's not a common occurrence, you can't prove it outright on paper, you would make sure you would need to verify this in the field through data. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Another challenge is currently for piped water systems, it's not clear if and how you'd be able to apply carbon credits. There's an issue of additionality. There are people who are doing it, and there's also people who get denied for doing it. which is you have to prove additionality, that whatever it is you're doing wouldn't happen without you, and that becomes more difficult when you're doing an inline chlorination system. That said, that also kind of sets up a backwards incentive, right? You can actually, if you're paying carbon credits and you're not incentivizing people to do inline chlorination, you're not incentivizing people to do safely managed water. So you're almost incentivizing, if you're only allowed to do carbon credits, and the carbon credits get very expensive for doing chlorinating water points, then you're not incentivizing safely managed water. So yeah, there should be a clear methodology, either a clear methodology or clarity within the methodologies on how inline water treatment gets used. So yeah, a few recommendations here. I talked about evaluating suppressed demand, adaptation over mitigation. So there is a lot of this focus is on this is a mitigation strategy, right? But carbon, water and water points are being affected mostly through an adaptation lens. And there aren't really any methodologies or funds that are specific. There's no adaptation credits for carbon. So but however, there are other avenues for adaptation funding out there that can help round this out. Also, carbon credits and water resource management. There's a lot of potential there. It's definitely worth investigating, and we will definitely go into that more in the study. But just trying to keep it reasonable today. But there is a lot of potential there. And then again, understanding emissions from sanitation. To be clear, I'll be sharing these slides with anybody here and also people online. But yeah, and then I have kind of a summary of the recommendations so far. So let's go into the feasibility study we did. Okay. So our aim has been so the feasibility study, we conducted it in the Amhara region of Ethiopia in 3 WaterAids. Our aim has been to rigorously assess the viability of leveraging carbon finance to sustain water access in Ethiopia's most vulnerable and low-income communities. This study was done in a collaboration between Millennium Water Alliance and our members, and Hilton, Conrad N. Hilton Foundation project implementing partners, an organization called Nature Co., which specializes in carbon credits for nature, and then working with these organizations to collect data. A key component of our study is a practical application of the case study, see how it would work in the real world in Ethiopia. We based this on most of our efforts were based on a project by Winrock that focused on transitioning boreholes from diesel to solar power, and we evaluated through that. And for the watershed management, our focus is mostly on the Tana sub basin of the Abai, a water basin in Ethiopia. So methodology, so we conducted an in-depth literature review, which we kind of went over right now. We also have done a stakeholder analysis, stakeholder consultations, spoke with those that be most impacted to get their take on it. And we recognize the importance of involving these communities. In short, from that, people were very positive and promising, but it also had, at the same time, had a wait and see attitude. Is like, I'll believe it when I see it, kind of way of thinking. But there was nobody. We didn't run anybody who was adamantly opposed to doing carbon credits. So we also did some household surveys in 210 households across three WaterAids. We're also doing some financial modeling based on expenditure data, operations and maintenance, cost of monitoring, cost of implementing the carbon credits. The feasibility study was done by Nature Co., and the learning study was done by a gentleman named Lars Osterwalder, who also works with IRC. So from the household survey, so 21% of the households that we surveyed treated their drinking water. Out of the 210, of those, only one of them treated their water using boiling. And of those who did not treat their water, only 5.7% say they would treat it given the proper resources. I will also add that these are rule systems. So on our side, we probably should have asked some additional questions on what they consider their water quality already, which is something that's not in any of the guides or anything. But it's very possible that they thought there was just no need for treatment. Fuel usage. So 93% of the houses used wood or charcoal, and presence of E. coli was found in all of the water sources, not the households at those sources themselves.
Yeah, hi everybody. Hey, good job, Jason. This is Evan Thomas at the University of Colorado. We're, of course, working closely with Jason and his team on some of these projects in Kenya and elsewhere. I just want to clarify, add a little bit of dimension to the suppressed demand explanation, Jason. I know you kind of went through it a little bit fast there. Suppressed demand is better conceptualized as the idea that there is demand for energy use to boil water that is suppressed because of poverty. That's the way you interpret the terminology for suppressed demand. And so I think, Jason, in your quick summary, it was sort of suggested that what matters is the existing people that are boiling water. That's true, but in reality, the methodology allows you to extend the ratios of people that are currently boiling water to everybody, including the people that aren't boiling water. So in a quick example, if 20% of people boil water and 10% of people use chlorine and 70% of people don't do anything at all, they drink untreated water, you're allowed to get carbon credits for 66%, 2/3 of all people, that you're delivering water to, not just the 20% that we're boiling. So even if you have really low rates of boiling, it doesn't matter the absolute number. What matters is the ratio of boiling to other treatment practices, excluding no treatment at all. So if it's 5% of boiling and 1% are using chlorine, in reality, that means you could get carbon credits for 80% of the people you're delivering water to. Suppressed demand has been controversial because what that means is that you're getting carbon credits for people that are not, in fact, using energy and producing emissions. But in reality, it was a concept created by the carbon credit registries to recognize the fact that there was very little carbon credit activity in markets and energy use in the places that are being the most impacted by climate change on water security. So it's really better thought of as a form of climate reparative payments rather than the strict technicalities of the methodology. But I just want to clarify for those of you who haven't heard about this before that it's not strictly about the existing baseline water boiling practices.
A few complexities and challenges on carbon credits. So the prices for carbon credits are fluctuating. It's hard to pin this down. So even if we do a financial model, it's something that needs to be interactive. You need to be able to engage with the model based on the given prices. And there's also just a general lack of real solid data on operations and maintenance, especially over time. So it's really, we usually use things like percentages, or we did our best to go back and document it, but to have clear data on what it costs to maintain a new, let's say solar panel, 4-tap system over 10 years, there is not solid data on that. More complexities on carbon credits. So there's a high fixed cost for implementing carbon credits. Just to get a project started, it can be very expensive. There's extensive monitoring and evaluation, and this is over a 10-year period. So you're talking about visiting each one of these, not each one of these sites, a significant sample of sites over once a year for 10 years. Again, as we mentioned previously, these need to be very rigorous and transparent processes. So again, the water quality challenges, there's yearly water quality check it is difficult to achieve undetectable levels of E. coli. So that's another consideration. So that's something that needs to be very actively done. So there again, there are many factors that need to come together. So you have population density, scale. You need to have sufficient boiling rates, the right fuel types, the right price per credit. You have to be able to plan for the cost of maintenance and the cost of monitoring. Other considerations and opportunities. So watershed management. Again, there's opportunities in afforestation. This includes fruit trees. So not just planting of certain kinds of fruit trees. It also counts for crop trees as well, and wetland creation and restoration. Again, also use of nature-based solutions. Many of these nature-based solutions require ongoing maintenance, which has a cost associated with it, which carbon credits would ideally be able to pay for in the long term, ongoing. Scale is a key factor. So for any carbon credit project to work, you do need scale. As the fixed costs that I was mentioning previously, I would advise that anybody who's considering doing carbon credit projects for water to see who's doing it already, or try to find other projects that are going on, and try to really go for the scale necessary. If you think about it in terms of trying to provide maintenance funding in the long term, it shouldn't really matter who's the person doing it. And the old saying goes, if you want to go far, go together. But like I said, the more scale we're able to achieve doing these, the more money we're able to leave for maintenance for these water systems. Again, there's a need for adaptation. So there's increasingly we need to be able to adapt water projects to the impacts of climate change, and currently there are no credits for adaptation. So what to expect in the final study? So we'll include the certification process and requirements overview. We'll include a comprehensive financial modeling and so a better analysis of carbon credits for watershed management. I just got the draft report for this last week, and I think it was you can get 5.8 in just the Tana subbasin in the areas that are most likely or most productive areas for carbon credits. Just doing not even looking at wetland stuff, just afforestation, it would be 5.8 million credits over 30 years. And I think that translates, if you were to do that whole area at the price of $20 per credit, that would be $3 million a year. So of course you couldn't design a project that reaches every single area, obviously, but the point is there's a lot of potential there. And the scale, I'll add one more thing on this. I guess just to kind of wrap it up, it's not that. So basically, to be able to do carbon credits for water, you just have, if the circumstances need to line up, and it's not something we should be naive about. We need to be transparent and clear about it. It means when you're doing a project, collect more data. Make sure you have that. If you collect enough data, you're already doing a project anyways. You're already collecting data. If it turns out that your project is a good fit for carbon credits, then yes, it's definitely worth considering. That said, it's not something that should necessarily. It's not going to work in every circumstance. Basically, it's very much on a case by case basis. Questions, feedback, discussion.
There's something online from Kai Rydell. When projects that are certified need to be reevaluated, are they grandfathered into methodology they originally received accreditation with? or do they need to be revalidated with revised methodologies?
It is my understanding that they get grandfathered in. However, the way things are going right now, if that changed, that would not surprise me at all. And if anything, I would plan on that.
I had a few questions. Maybe I'll just run through I had 3 different questions. I'll run through them if it's possible to answer straight. If not, just take it. The first is I was wondering if in your review you identified any current projects that are acquiring carbon credits for WASH programming in any of the 3 areas you mentioned. Second question was, you mentioned that the need for improved methodologies, or in some cases, the existence of methodologies for calculating carbon credits for something like sanitation. And I was wondering if we're aware of any engagement with any of the large groups like Gold Standard that do the carbon accreditation around any of those methods. And then my third question was just on when you were talking about financial viability. It's just to help me understand, are we thinking about this in terms of there needs to be enough revenue to cover the cost of a project, or are we thinking about it as potentially supplemental revenue that could support project costs or potentially even be used for communities and participants? Now, because I can see that could be, even if the carbon credits aren't of the volume that it could fully cover the costs, there may still be value in covering some costs or in being able to support communities.
Yeah, so on the question of the projects in Ethiopia, there are 25 projects that are currently receiving credits for boiling water or safe water credits. And there might even be more that we weren't able to find. So this is based on the registry. Technically, you could also get certified separately and sell your credits directly to somebody who wants to buy them. So that could be happening and we wouldn't even know. There's also, yeah, so there's the 25 projects. Not for the other 2 that I mentioned, there aren't any. And then for the afforestation, we didn't get into that, but there are many projects on that out there already. None of them were specific about water resource management, but they very well could be, applying to that as well. The second question was regarding the advocacy. Hopefully, after we have these dialogues, conversations, publish this, and we would be able to have an informed discussion on how we can, advocate for more of these methodologies. There are people currently doing work on this. I think I don't want to say the names because I don't want to make sure I use the wrong name, but there are people who are literally studying this and are going to be advocating for it. And then the last question. Can you repeat the last question again?
Just in terms of the viability.
Oh yeah.
Costs of this.
So we try to look at it the whole gamut, right? So it's everything from how much would you need if you wanted to cover all your capital expenditures as well, but the very minimum is to be able to fund maintenance, not even operations and maintenance. So operations, you can get operations money from charging for your water services and everything. The idea would be to fund the long-term maintenance of these water points. We all know that maintenance is probably the biggest challenge that we have for sustaining water access, and especially for the most vulnerable and poorest communities. And this could go, if feasible, it could go a long way to covering that. And again, this is on top of the cost of implementing the carbon credits themselves. So you have your monitoring, your registration costs, your third-party auditing costs, etc. So, yeah.
Thanks for that. First question, if I could add on to what Tony was asking, are there restrictions on what you can do with the funding in terms of if you're trying to cover maintenance costs? Can you funnel some of the funding if you're an NGO? Can you funnel it to a local government? Can you funnel it to a private sector business who needs subsidy? Like, are you allowed to do anything that supports maintenance, or are there restrictions on the funding? And then my second question is probably really easy for you, but I'm curious that when you talk about that a project needs to be large and it's ideal if you're a smaller group or a smaller project to collaborate with others to get that scale, is that restricted to a specific country when you register or a specific geographic area, or can it be something that covers an entire region?
So sorry, I want to make sure I get that first question. What was the first question?
Are there restrictions on what you can
Okay,
do
yeah, that's what it was. All right, so there aren't any real restrictions. However, countries have their own restrictions. For example, in Kenya, there's a requirement that 25% of the revenue from a carbon project go back to the community. But the carbons themselves, there aren't restrictions that I know of. And however, I mean, keep in mind that these are being heavily scrutinized. So if you are using the carbon revenue to buy the nonprofits president a boat, I mean, obviously that's a thing. And then the second question, the second question, I forgot the first one.
You refer to a project.
Yeah.
To achieve scale, can it go across multiple countries, or are there specific restrictions on the geographic size or area?
It can go to different countries. I don't want to use the acronyms now because I always get them backwards. But there's a way to register projects like as an umbrella project. So this could be like at a country level or regional level. You do have to be specific. All right, this is going to be this kind of like safe water project or a safe water and reforestation project. And then on top of that, you have smaller sub projects you can do you're able to fit these smaller sub projects into these bigger projects. You could also retroactively do projects, but only up to a year. And the start date is breaking ground. So from breaking ground, contract signed. So from contract signed, let's say you're building a water point, the day you sign a contract with the contractor, that's when the clock starts ticking, and you have a year or two to start to have it all registered and everything.
Jude Collin from Save Children. So it just seems to me we're not quite then at a stage with this where it's a kind of viable revenue stream yet. Would that be the case? There's some positive signs, but for the average size project, say that we support something like Ethiopia, we're not quite at a stage where this is a promising revenue stream. You mentioned the 3-year meeting and auditing, and presumably that comes with costs as well. So this is a scale issue.
Yeah, and I guess it's definitely as a case by case basis. So and again, it's a scale issue. So if people organize themselves, there's no reason why this isn't viable now. And there are people who are trying to achieve this at scale, going all in on this to get scale for water credits. And we're going to include some case studies in the final studies on what people are doing out there. But I would say, if you just decide to we're doing this one project, and I want this small project, and I want to apply carbon credits to it, at the current prices, it may not be feasible. That said, carbon credits might shoot up to $50 a credit, and then all of a sudden, everything is feasible. So it really depends on these different factors.
Thanks, Jason. Ellen Walter from IRC. So going back a little bit to what you just said about people. So the people side of it, how much or did you look at the community, the government, what do all of the other stakeholders? And when you say there's groups of people who are working together, who do you really mean by people? Is it national level governments? Is it a lot of NGOs getting together? Is it private sector? Who's actually the people involved? And when you get down to the most local level of the users or the shifts that you're talking about, how much do they know what carbon credits are, and honestly, how much do they care about what that is? You know, like where it, because you say it has to go, you know, a certain percentage of the funding has to go back, or the resources go back to the community, but like, what is that in a government scheme? Like, what does that actually mean from the people side of things?
No, so yes, everything, you're very right, everything, none of that is clear at all. So even on the government requirements, it doesn't stipulate how or when that has to be done. It is not clear if it needs to be just clearly indicated that the money's set aside, or if it needs to go into some government coffer. For water specifically, there are NGOs getting together to kind of do this, and some of them are already. There are many that are already implementing on what I would say the old methodology, and then others, and some of those are making plans to do it using the new methodology. And one thing I didn't mention, because it's not written anywhere, but we've gotten on good authority that that they are going to require remote monitoring for every single water point. That even a hand pump to monitor flows, because they don't want to give credits to people who are, you know, they don't want you to claim credits on a hand pump that you just fixed and are setting aside that nobody uses. So yeah, so as far as water goes, I don't know of any governments doing any carbon credits and organizing those. However, they are doing it for other kinds of projects like reforestation and things like that. So there are so all these things, all these scenarios you said, they are all like existing. But for water specifically, I it's just the ones I mentioned. And as far as the stakeholders, we spoke with community leaders. We didn't get all the way down to doing a focus group with community members, but in our case, we would not necessarily be dealing with the community at large. We'd be dealing with the WashCo, whatever water association that would be implementing this. We also consulted with the different levels of government. Many of them had heard of carbon credits, but not carbon credits for water. So carbon credits in general are people have started to hear of them, but the ones for water, not so much.
So my first question is about following on the geographic expansion and on that kind of broader umbrella of multiple countries or geographies. If there have been any like around and boundary area. Then the second question is just if you have provide a bit more insight on folks that are looking more and working on the needs of the patient.
Thank you for both. I have not seen any work on transboundary carbon credit projects, and frankly, I haven't really seen any projects that are specific to watershed management. I'm sure they are out there, but maybe they sell them differently. Like they tend to maybe focus on what the activities are and not the purpose. But yeah, I haven't come across any projects that are like, we are doing this watershed, carbon credit project. Like I said, it might exist, and my focus has been more on Ethiopia and Kenya actually. So, and regarding the adaptation, there are adaptation funds out there. Some of them are specific to water. I know the World Bank has funding available, and it's something that we really very much should pursue. Like I was saying, these carbon credits are not something that's going to apply to everything. So there is a need to look for adaptation funding. There's also an adaptation fund, for example, from USAID, that part of their mandate is to provide funding for water adaptation, water access adaptation. However, I have not seen very many projects, if any, specific to water from that fund.
Amy with Water Mission, I have a question. Maybe you can't speak to it because you didn't get past the feasibility stage, but I guess it makes sense to me how you would do a baseline and an end line if you're doing a project without any sort of water treatment using clean energy, but you were talking about existing infrastructure and solarizing these boreholes. And so I'm just wondering, was there any sort of functionality that was there previously? And if you can speak to how the regulations or the guidelines talk to how you would measure baseline and endline, if there's some sort of existing project already in place that you're going back to either rehabbing or fixing, if you're able to speak to that at all.
Yeah, so in this case, it was the diesel solar conversion. So for the project to be viable, it's not just that either one. It's increasing uptime, right? So if you have a diesel powered pump that's probably only running a few hours a day because of the cost, you're replacing it with solar, you have increased uptime. So that's one factor. The other factor is so you're able to actually increase the amount of water they have access to, which means you're able to claim that difference in the water as the improvement, and you're able to get the credits from there. The other factor is the water quality. So in this case, all of them were not considered safe water. Therefore, if you were to apply carbon credits to it and increase the amount of water available, you'd be able to claim all of that water as part of the carbon credit scheme. So it's those two factors. So water quantity, water quality. So a lot of times the ones that the older projects that only focused on maybe that didn't focus on treatment, they usually rehabilitate a borehole, for example, or fix a broken hand pump. Their current water access is zero. You come rehabilitate it, make sure test the water, make sure it's good, and then you claim the credits for the population within a 1 kilometer. I didn't specify that, but it goes under like JMP rules. The household surveys are basically the JMP surveys, along with surveys on types of fuels used, types of hygiene practices, and so on. So there's also a requirement for hygiene promotion on the safe water one. Sorry, I didn't get too much on the technical details. Literally, this is a Mary Poppins bag of information. It just does not stop. It is just like it can get very complicated as far as the processes and such. So
thanks, Jason. Mark Newman with WRI. And just following up to that, excuse me, I'm thinking of a model like the water fund. So you have investments in WRM upstream that have been improving the water supply source for an urban environment. Would you be able to, technically then be able to claim, you get some carbon credits for that improvement? And I know that there's the methodology is still emerging, or you didn't look at that for this study on the afforestation or whatever that investment, intervention might be upstream. Then you can also claim a water quality, like an impact on water quality for carbon credit because for that urban environment. And then could you also develop carbon credits for the urban users that would, if you found that they would be boiling water in informal sediments, for example. So there's like this wealth of, or a larger scale water funds model that could have just tons of carbon credits emerging. I just, kind of thinking about that. My question is around the demand for the carbon credits. Knowing nothing about the space, is the demand coming from corporations, impact investors, like in this space, just so that as soon as carbon credits hit, it's like that they're kind of taken up or secured or whatever, that or is there any kind of potential that you create all this demand for these carbon credits and that they're not being used or bought up or acquired, and then you're missing that revenue stream for the ongoing maintenance for that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are so the thing is, you can double these things up. The thing you'd have to prove is that this project wouldn't be able to happen without the carbon credits, right? So if you can show that, like, because we stack this, then we're able to do this project, then that would be very viable for carbon credits. But if you're just going to do it anyways, per se, then it might be more more difficult. And when I say that too, it's not the one-time part; it's the ongoing part. So it's not the case of a safe water point. It's not necessarily you building the water point, but you maintaining the water point for a duration. And then in the urban areas, there's actually quite a few safe water stuff happening already in urban areas and credits in general. I mean, one of the issues, one of the reasons we did this study was because there's a lot of credits that are funded by investors to make the profit out of them, but those all go after low-hanging fruit. So they go after the least expensive credits to implement, where you have a lot of density, where you have easy access for monitoring, and this tends to be more in urban areas. And I mean, one thing we've talked about, I mean, you should, when you plan these things out, there's no reason why not to look at it more holistically, right? So if you do a carbon credit project in an urban area and a rural area, the hope is you'd help level your costs out and get some of that scale that you need to be able to help and provide services for the more rural communities. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry, just to follow up on my, because I'm thinking about the reliability, post for that revenue stream for that maintenance. And once the NGO leaves, an organization leaves, and it's 5 years after, 10 years after, and if it's just, and I know that then that would be set up in a agreement, contracts, whatever it might be, and then when the third party continues to verify that yes, the impacts are still being delivered, the project is functioning, water quality levels are good. That just the community that's relying on the maintenance, that revenue stream continues. Or I imagine there would have to be a lot of or some technical assistance for a dedicated, third party person or someone from the community that continues to make sure that we're planning, like, hey, we encountered this challenge, and we're concerned that our revenue stream for this carbon credit is going to go away. We don't have additional funds to fix it. It just goes away, or it just it shuts off because that carbon credit expires, and now that community is it's similar to other aid humanitarian or aid projects, development projects that after 5 years it's done and there's not that revenue stream for the maintenance after.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess from our discussions on this, you're already going to have to set up a maintenance system, right, to be able to do this over 10 years. If you do one of these projects, you are going to be responsible for the maintenance of this water point, directly or indirectly, for 10 years in order to get those credits. Ideally, you would plan it for 20 years, even if you're only going to get credit for 10 years, right? Just the idea is you would have those 10 years to figure out these systems down the road. What does that mean? Does that mean you have to maybe your calculation means you're saving more money up front to be able to cover the maintenance costs in the longer term? I'm actually not sure what that would look like, but the idea is that if you are going to do one of these projects, that you would plan for this, and you can't say you don't have enough time. 10 years is a lot of time to figure this out. I hope that was helpful.
Two things real quick. And run out of the room and come back, so if you address this when I'm down, re-address it. One is just I mean, reference to before briefly, but on the bullet there about future inclusion, where you want feedback, suggestions for what people would like to see in the final report. You mentioned a kind of a time frame that should happen. That's one question. The other one is, I kind of got the idea, especially from one of the earlier slides. Next, maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but the next window of opportunity or challenge to macro scale to do something about framing certification processes or certification is needed. What is that? When is that? We have a slide that said there needs to be more done on how to certify what could be applicable. So for credit. So what's your answer to that?
That's a
Sorry,
good.
this is John Sparks, Money Water Alliance. I should introduce myself.
Thanks for that softball question. No, that brings me a good opportunity to mention that a couple of MWA members, Verity, UC Boulder, WaterAid, are currently conducting a project, an evaluation of carbon credits for water as well. Their look is probably more on the global side of things, how this looks in the bigger picture. It will likely be more specific when it comes to these advocacy things, and that will be a good forum for taking this forward. We very much try to complement that by focusing more on the implementer side of things, what this looks like on the ground, what what it would take for someone to do carbon credits for water as part of their projects. So yeah, after I think once that study is being done, I don't want to say in collaboration, or it was requested by the gold standard who does the methodology. So I think that study will help inform a lot of what our discussion is, and this study will help kind of hopefully help ground truth that what that would actually look like on the ground. They are also presenting at the Conference of the Parties (COP) on the 5th. I very much look forward to seeing what that study finds, and I very much hope that our study is a good complement to that one.
Oh, this is I'm Lena with consultancy firm Flush. You mentioned that there was a lot of scrutiny around projects saying that they're going to generate a certain amount of carbon credits and not performing. Have you so far, in your knowledge of carbon credits being used in the wash sector, have you seen this issue being prevalent? A lot of projects not performing, carbon credits not being generated, as said, and generally from your other interviews, what was some of the hesitation from stakeholders to start getting involved in carbon credits?
On the first question, I'll leave it with it has happened. Yeah, there are articles out there where you could find that delve into it more. Yeah, a lot of it has to do with a lot of like I was mentioning earlier, there are a lot of carbon credit projects that are very much focused on seeking as much return as possible from their investments. So that always leaves room for people trying to profiteer off the carbon credits. As far as the second question was, the hesitation was more of a I would say it was almost like the natural hesitation on doing any project, even if you just come and show up and say, hey, we're going to do some water projects here. So their hesitations are more on that side. I mean, yeah, I think when they went to go do the stakeholder consultations, one thing we pushed was just like try to find out what are the things that they would not like about this. Like, and we had trouble pulling that out of people. So we actually didn't get much in the way of negative stuff from the stakeholders. They very much look forward to having money for maintenance, right? And having money for maintenance is a good motivator. If I tell you, if you pay somebody X amount of dollars every month to say to keep your water system running, it's much more likely to keep running. I also say there's a value into the continued monitoring that's involved. I can't really say what the actual value, but there's something about that, being able to have data over water systems over time that I think would be valuable to our sector. Mm-hmm.
So, this is Ellen again from IRC. So I'm just curious about the role of a country's economy in this whole process. For example, the inflation rates right now in Ethiopia are pretty high. So does that have an effect? And I think maybe, I don't know if you have a follow-up to that, but.
Yeah, Laura Brunson with Water for People. I have a related question. because of what you were saying not too long ago, Jason, about the need to make this 10-year commitment to the project. So if your project is signed and started in 2025 at X rates of carbon credits or X dollars per credit, are you in that rate for the duration of your project, or is that rate going to fluctuate monthly, yearly, so you're at risk for how that rate is going to change throughout?
Mhm. So the commitment, I'd say, would be commitment wise, it's probably more like 5 years. But the way we kind of did the math on this, we kind of used 10. Nice, got 10 fingers. But the rate is going to fluctuate as far as on the open market. You are able to find people who are willing to take on that risk to give you a fixed price over time. That could help minimize the risk on your end for implementation. So that would be one way to mitigate it. Not to say that the prices could go shoot up and then you'd be left, you wouldn't make that profit, but that necessarily doesn't matter on our end if our goal is to be able to keep the maintenance of these water points. On the inflation side, it is extremely complicated. It's complicated to do a study that involves financial models when there's rampant inflation as well. So we're trying to account for it the best we can, but it is something you have to consider. And I know, and I really, Evan, I hope that maybe they touch on that in the more global study.
Yeah, just a plug for that. We are presenting on Sunday morning, both virtually and in person, at COP28 in Dubai in the Water Pavilion. So this report that Jason mentioned was commissioned by WaterAid, the Resilient Water Accelerator, HSBC, the Voluntary Carbon Markets Initiative, VCMI, and was written by our team here at the University of Colorado Boulder on the state and trends of global water security and carbon credits. So it's inclusive of what Jason was presenting today, but also goes beyond this to things like irrigation upgrades and nutrient reductions and centralized wastewater treatment. So we can circulate that invite to anybody that's attended this meeting as well. It's at 6 a.m. Mountain Time, so 8 a.m. Eastern on Sunday morning.
My impression is a lot of the national regulations around the carbon markets are quite nation-based. And I was just wondering, I know you were looking specifically at Ethiopia, but if you looked at that at all or had any recommendations around how programs that are considering carbon programming water should then engage with national governments.
We do have a whole section on that in the study. Yeah. So I'll cover it. There aren't any direct, I remember there aren't any direct laws that are about carbon credits, but I think there's some things that do apply or consider laws that to consider. But like I said, I mean, in Kenya, there's proposing a law right now that there's the one that they passed as 25%, but then there was another one that would, I don't even remember the details because the law was so demanding that you basically, if it were to pass, you wouldn't be able to do any of these projects. It just wouldn't, there's no way the math would work out. Yeah. And then some countries are actively looking into how they can get in the carbon credit game, so that's one thing. And then the other one is the question of the macro thing again. It's a question of ownership. So who owns this credit? If an American company buys it for a project in Kenya, is it owned by Kenya or is it owned by who gets to count it against their emissions that they report got? Double counting. I don't have an answer to that one. Don't ask.
There was just a final comment online from Daniel Dadiva. Thanks for the presentation. just to flag, we're doing some scoping work at Stockholm Environment Institute on climate finance opportunities for sanitation, broadly for both mitigation and adaptation.
All right. Well, we'll leave it at that. Don't hesitate to message me. If you have Teams, you could actually even continue chatting in there, and I will see that as well, so you can open this up afterwards. So yeah, please do. Thank you for joining us. We'll share this with everybody registered as well, and hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening.